The air crackled with anticipation, a palpable tension that seemed to hang in the frigid morning air. Winter's icy breath was close, wrapping the world in a blanket of cold that bit at exposed skin and turned every exhalation into a visible puff of mist. The tribe, Keda's tribe, gathered in a solemn assembly, their faces etched with the gravity of the task ahead. They prepared for the sacred hunt, a ritual that had been passed down through generations, a test of skill, endurance, and unity. Men sharpened spears, their faces grim and focused, each stroke of the stone against metal a promise of survival. Women mended furs, their hands deftly working the animal skins, their eyes betraying a mix of worry and hope for the hunter's safe return. Children, Keda among them, watched and learned, their young minds absorbing the importance of the hunt, the skills needed, and the bravery required. This hunt would decide their survival, the success of which would mean food and warmth through the harsh winter months. Keda felt a tremor of excitement, but also fear, a duality that churned within him as he stood on the cusp of proving himself. He wasn't sure he was ready, the weight of expectation pressing down on his young shoulders. His father, a seasoned hunter, saw the uncertainty in his son's eyes, a reflection of his own younger self. He placed a reassuring hand on Keda's shoulder, a gesture that spoke volumes of unspoken support and understanding. "Fear is a wise teacher, son," he said, his voice rough with experience and the wisdom of many hunts. "But courage is a faithful companion," he continued, his words a lifeline for Keda to grasp in the storm of his emotions. Keda clung to his father's words like a lifeline, drawing strength from the wisdom imparted to him. He would need both fear and courage for what lay ahead, a balance that would guide him through the trials of the hunt. As the sun painted the sky with hues of orange and red, the tribe set out, their silhouettes stark against the vibrant backdrop. Their footsteps were silent on the snow-covered ground, a testament to their skill and the gravity of their mission. They moved with the grace of wolves, their breath misting in the frigid air, each step a calculated move in the dance of survival. Keda, walking beside his father, felt a surge of pride, a sense of belonging to something greater than himself. He was part of something ancient, something powerful, a lineage of hunters that stretched back through the ages. But deep down, a sliver of doubt lingered, a whisper of uncertainty that he would have to confront and overcome. The tribe's totem stood tall, a symbol of their heritage and strength, a reminder of the ancestors who had walked this path before them. Silent glances were exchanged among the hunters, a wordless communication that spoke of trust and shared purpose. Keda adjusted his fur cloak, steeling himself for the challenges ahead, his heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. His father gave him a final look, a silent message of faith and encouragement, a bond that would carry Keda through the trials to come. And with that, the hunters disappeared into the forest, the beginning of a journey that would test their limits and forge their spirits. Keda's face was set with determination, ready to face whatever the hunt would bring, ready to prove himself worthy of his lineage. The forest closed in around them, a living entity that held both danger and opportunity, a place where only the brave would thrive. Back at the camp, the fire burned brightly, a beacon of hope and warmth, a reminder of what they were fighting for. The embers glowed with life, mirroring the spirit of the tribe, resilient and enduring, ready to face the challenges of the hunt. They tracked a boar, its tusks long and sharp. Keda had practiced with his spear, but facing a living creature was different. He hesitated. The boar snorted, steam rising from its nostrils. His father whispered, "Be strong, son, quick and clean." Keda raised his spear, his hand trembling. He closed his eyes and struck, but he was too slow. The boar wheeled around, its dark eyes burning with fury. Keda stumbled back, fear constricting his throat. His father moved with lightning speed. He intercepted the boar, driving his spear deep into its side. The boar let out a deafening squeal before collapsing to the ground. Keda stared at the fallen beast, his stomach churning. He had wanted to prove himself, but the reality of taking a life left him shaken. His father placed a hand on his shoulder, his grip firm. "It is the way of our people," he said, his voice laced with understanding. "Life feeds on life, but never take it lightly." The hunt continued. Excitement turned to terror. The dense forest was alive with the sounds of nature, the rustling of leaves and the distant calls of birds. The hunters moved with practiced stealth, their eyes scanning the underbrush for any sign of movement. They had been tracking a herd of deer for hours, their stomachs growling with hunger, their minds focused on the promise of a successful hunt. But as the minutes ticked by, a sense of unease began to creep in. The forest seemed to grow quieter, the air heavier, as if the very trees were holding their breath. A roar, bone-jarring and primal, echoed through the forest. It was a sound that seemed to come from the very depths of the earth, a sound that sent shivers down the spines of the hunters. The roar was unlike anything they had ever heard before, a terrifying reminder of the dangers that lurked in the shadows. The birds took flight, their cries of alarm adding to the cacophony. The hunters froze, their hearts pounding in their chests, their eyes wide with fear. A cave lion, larger than any Keda had ever seen, emerged from the trees. Its massive form moved with a predatory grace, muscles rippling beneath its tawny fur. The lion's eyes glowed with an intensity that spoke of hunger and dominance, a primal force of nature that demanded respect. Keda's breath caught in his throat as he took in the sheer size of the beast. It was a creature of legend, a living nightmare that had stepped out of the shadows and into their reality. Its eyes blazed with hunger, its fangs bared in a menacing snarl. Panic seized the hunters. They scrambled for safety. The lion lunged. The forest erupted into chaos as the hunters scattered, their shouts of alarm mingling with the lion's roars. Keda's heart raced as he ran, his mind a whirlwind of fear and adrenaline. He could hear the pounding of the lion's paws behind him, the sound of branches snapping as the beast closed in. The hunters' carefully laid plans had been shattered in an instant, replaced by a desperate struggle for survival. Kappa, Keda's closest friend, tripped and fell. In the chaos, Kappa's foot caught on a root, sending him sprawling to the ground. Keda's heart sank as he saw his friend fall, a cry of warning dying on his lips. The forest seemed to close in around them, the shadows growing darker, the air colder. Kappa's eyes were wide with fear as he struggled to get up, but it was too late. The lion was upon him in an instant. With a terrifying roar, the beast pounced, its massive form blotting out the sun. Kappa's scream echoed through the forest, a sound of pure terror that sent chills down Keda's spine. The lion's claws raked across Kappa's body, its jaws closing around his throat with a sickening crunch. Keda could only watch in horror, his mind unable to process the scene unfolding before him. Keda watched in horror as the beast's jaws clamped down on Kappa's throat. The sight was seared into his memory, a moment of pure, unadulterated terror that would haunt him for the rest of his days. Kappa's struggles grew weaker, his eyes pleading for help that Keda could not give. The forest seemed to hold its breath, the only sound the lion's growls and the sickening crunch of bone. A scream died in his throat. Everything happened so fast. One moment they had been hunters, the next, they were prey. The world had turned upside down in an instant, and Keda felt a sense of helplessness wash over him. He wanted to run, to fight, to do something, anything to save his friend, but his body refused to move. He was rooted to the spot, a silent witness to the horror unfolding before him. The other hunters fought back, spears flying. They rallied, their fear giving way to a desperate determination. Spears flew through the air, their tips glinting in the dappled sunlight. The lion roared in pain as the spears found their mark, its massive form thrashing as it tried to fend off the attackers. The hunters moved with a coordinated precision, their years of training and experience coming to the fore. They knew that their only chance of survival lay in working together, in standing their ground against the beast. Finally, with a deafening roar, the lion fell, its body riddled with spears. The forest seemed to sigh in relief as the beast's massive form hit the ground. The hunters stood in a circle around the fallen lion, their breaths coming in ragged gasps, their bodies trembling with exhaustion and adrenaline. They had won, but the victory felt hollow. The cost had been too high, but it was too late for Kappa. He lay still, his eyes staring vacantly at the unforgiving sky. The life had drained from his body, leaving only a shell behind. Keda knelt beside his friend, his heart heavy with grief. He reached out a trembling hand to close Kappa's eyes, a final act of kindness for the friend he had lost. He lay still, his eyes staring vacantly at the unforgiving sky. The forest, once a place of life and promise, now felt like a tomb. The sky above seemed indifferent to their pain, the sun continuing its journey across the heavens as if nothing had happened. Keda felt a deep sense of loss, a void that could never be filled. A heavy silence descended upon the group. They stood in a circle around Kappa's body, their faces etched with sorrow. The forest, once filled with the sounds of life, was now eerily quiet. The hunters' breaths came in ragged gasps, their bodies trembling with exhaustion and grief. They had lost one of their own, and the weight of that loss pressed down on them like a physical burden. Keda felt tears freezing on his cheeks. The cold air bit at his skin, but he barely noticed. His mind was a whirlwind of emotions, a storm of grief, anger, and guilt. He had survived, but at what cost? The tears flowed freely, a silent testament to the pain that gripped his heart. He looked around at his fellow hunters, seeing his own pain reflected in their eyes. They built a pyre for Kappa. It was a solemn task, each movement heavy with the weight of their loss. They gathered wood and kindling, their hands moving with a mechanical precision. Kappa's body was placed gently on the pyre, his lifeless form a stark reminder of the dangers they faced. The hunters stood in a circle around the pyre, their heads bowed in silent prayer. As the flames consumed his friend's body, they sang ancient songs of mourning. The songs were a link to their ancestors, a way to honor the fallen and to find solace in their shared grief. The flames danced and flickered, casting long shadows on the forest floor. The hunters' voices rose and fell in a haunting melody, their words carrying the weight of their sorrow. The smoke carried their sorrow, painting the sky with grief. It rose in thick, dark plumes, a visible manifestation of their pain. The sky above seemed to weep with them, the clouds gathering in a somber gray. Keda watched the smoke rise, feeling a sense of finality. Kappa was gone, but his memory would live on in their hearts. The hunt had ended, but the scars it left behind would remain forever. The hunt continued, driven by necessity. The cold bit at their faces and the wind howled through the barren landscape, but they pressed on. Each step was a struggle against the biting cold and the deep snow that threatened to swallow them whole. Their breath came out in visible puffs, a testament to the freezing temperatures they endured. They needed food to survive the winter. The scarcity of resources had driven them to the brink of desperation. Every day without a successful hunt meant another day closer to starvation. The hunters' eyes, hollow and sunken, reflected their dire situation. They were fighting not just for themselves but for their families and their tribe. They stalked a herd of bison, their massive forms casting long shadows on the snow. The bison were their lifeline, a source of sustenance that could mean the difference between life and death. The hunters moved with practiced stealth, their movements synchronized and deliberate. They knew that one wrong move could send the herd fleeing, and with it, their hopes of survival. The hunters took their positions, their faces grim and determined. Each hunter knew their role in the intricate dance of the hunt. They communicated with subtle gestures and silent signals, a language born of necessity and honed over generations. The weight of their ancestors' expectations hung heavy on their shoulders, driving them to succeed. Keda, still numb from Kappa's death, moved mechanically. The loss of his friend had left a gaping wound in his heart, one that the cold and the hunt could not numb. He felt disconnected from the world around him, as if he were merely a spectator in his own life. The grief was a constant companion, a shadow that followed him wherever he went. He felt like a ghost, watching himself from afar. The signal was given. The moment had come, and despite his inner turmoil, Keda's body responded with the muscle memory of countless hunts. His mind, however, remained distant, detached from the immediate danger and the urgency of the situation. The hunters charged, driving the bison towards a cliff edge. The ground shook with the force of the stampede, a thunderous roar that echoed through the valley. The bison, sensing the danger, ran in a frenzied panic, their hooves pounding the earth with relentless force. The hunters' shouts mingled with the bison's bellows, creating a cacophony of sound that filled the air. The ground trembled beneath the weight of the stampeding herd. Each step of the bison sent vibrations through the earth, a reminder of their immense power. The hunters had to be careful, navigating the chaos with precision and agility. One misstep could mean being trampled underfoot, a fate that Keda was perilously close to experiencing. Keda, caught in the chaos, lost his footing. The world around him seemed to slow down as he felt himself falling. The noise of the stampede faded into the background, replaced by the sound of his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. He reached out, grasping at the air, but there was nothing to hold on to. He tumbled over the edge, the world spinning into a dizzying blur. The sensation of falling was disorienting, a mix of fear and helplessness. Time seemed to stretch, each second an eternity as he plummeted towards the ground. The jagged rocks below loomed closer, and he braced himself for the inevitable impact. Pain exploded in his leg as he landed on a ledge, a jagged rock tearing through flesh and bone. The agony was immediate and all-consuming, a white-hot fire that seared through his body. He cried out, the sound lost in the roar of the stampede above. The pain was a cruel reminder of his vulnerability, a stark contrast to the numbness he had felt moments before. He lay there, Helpless, his blood staining the snow crimson, the cold seeped into his bones, intensifying the pain and sapping his strength. He tried to move, but his body refused to obey. The realization of his predicament hit him with full force. He was injured, alone, and at the mercy of the elements. The hunt continued above, the sounds of the chase fading into the distance. Keda was alone. The isolation was suffocating, a stark contrast to the camaraderie he had shared with his fellow hunters. He could hear their distant shouts, growing fainter with each passing moment. They were moving on, unaware of his plight. The icy wind whispered through the trees, carrying the first flakes of snow. The forest seemed to come alive with the sound of the wind, a haunting melody that filled the silence. The snowflakes danced in the air, delicate and fragile, a stark contrast to the harsh reality of Keda's situation. The cold was relentless, a constant reminder of the unforgiving environment he was trapped in. He knew he had to do something, he had to survive. The will to live burned within him, a flicker of hope in the darkness. He gritted his teeth, pushing through the pain, and tried to move. Each movement was a struggle, a battle against his own body and the elements. But he refused to give up. He couldn't afford to. But how could he, injured and alone in this unforgiving wilderness? The odds were stacked against him, and the path to survival seemed insurmountable. Yet in the face of overwhelming adversity, Keda found a spark of determination. He would fight, claw, and crawl his way to safety. The wilderness was vast and merciless, but so was his will to live. The journey ahead was uncertain, but he knew one thing for sure: he would not go down without a fight.